told me that something's happened to my bank account and I need to move all my money. They will find the proper number for Scotiabank, help that person make contact with Scotiabank, and contact them with the actual correct people, as opposed to the scammers who will just give you a telephone number and that you call back to the same number. So please feel free to fall asleep after I've mentioned this. This is the most important thing that I'm going to mention all day. This is something I found in one cartoon. It just emphasizes how much of the fraud that goes over the computer systems. The thieves came through the window, and we lose so much more money through computer fraud than we do for somebody breaking into our house. It's a violation. If somebody breaks into our house, they might steal TV, they might steal $100 that's lying around. But coming through the computer system or your phone, they will steal thousands upon thousands of dollars from people. And we see it every day. It's terrible for us is that we have people who lose tens of thousands of dollars through fraud, and we have to tell them that unfortunately there's not much we can do, and that's why I'm here trying to help prevent some of this. One of the big ways they do it is through phones. Auto dialers, robocallers, spoofing numbers. Anybody who has a cell phone, you've probably got calls from CRA saying that there's a warrant for your arrest. Those are all there trying to get you to click on a number or trying to get a hold of you. So as soon as they start talking to you, they have this entire script that they use. I've seen the scripts, and it's like, if someone says this, you say this. If you say this, it's an entire system that's set up, and it's designed to separate you from your money. Again, it's online fraud. If you go into your computer system, pop-ups, if you don't have pop-up blockers on your computers, a lot of times those are fraudulent. They're sending you to sites that are trying to get you to buy products that are fraudulent. Fake websites are often out there. They also, one of the things they try and do is they try and capture your credit card information so that they can take that information and use that information to buy the stuff for themselves or withdraw money. Social media networks and email. Social networks are great for keeping in touch with people, but they're also very dangerous for fraudsters, as the pastor found out. If someone is able to hack into your account, and they can then reach out and scam people in order to get people to give them money. I have a psychiatrist for the work I've done in relation to the policing, and his account got hacked, and I was getting messages saying, "Hey, I'm traveling. Can you buy a present for my daughter and send it to this address?" And you're thinking, okay, this is coming from a doctor. I've got a professional relationship with this person. I might want to do that person a favor. And his account got hacked, and it was entire fraudulent. He had to change all his social media networks, in order to avoid people getting defrauded from him. Mail. It's still, people still send scams to the mail. I have an example that came to my mailbox where they're trying to scam us out of out of money. You also have people who come to your door and try high-pressure sales. One of the scams we have right now are what they call Irish travelers. They're from the UK, from Ireland. They come over to Canada. They usually have a heavy British accent, and they come to your house and they say, "Hey, we'll repave your driveway for $2,000." They take the $2,000, and if they pave your driveway, it's with the tailings of asphalt, which comes apart in 6 months, and they take off. And you never get, there's no guarantee, there's no nothing. So people do come to your door to try and scam. Please tell me if I'm going over time. One of the most scary things is the investment scam. This gentleman here, I think he was 21 years of age when that picture was taken. He's flying around on a private jet, and he scammed a whole bunch of people in the Greater Toronto area. He had millions of dollars. And these were people who thought he was trading in cryptocurrency and that they were going to make a lot of money. And he had his sales pitch down, and he took a lot of the money, and he said he was going to invest it, but he just bought himself a plane, and he flew all around the world. And when the people came to withdraw that money, it was all gone. He lied and said it disappeared, but there are people in Canada who are willing to come and talk to you face to face and say that they're going to invest your money and make you a whole bunch more, but actually just steal it. So anybody, unless you're a really good broker already or you really know your investments, if anybody's coming to talk to you about cryptocurrency, it's a scam. You're not going to make millions of dollars. You're not going to double your investments. This is I think one of the worst scams out there is romance scams. This happens to older people and younger people, and in the younger people, it's mainly young women. They get, there's call centers that call, and it's a long scam. So they'll get you to start talking to them on a dating site. They'll start building up trust, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm stuck somewhere. I'm stuck in the Caribbean. I'm stuck in Africa. I'm stuck in Eastern Europe, and I need to pay taxes to get out of the country so I can come and marry you. And so can you send me $10,000 in order to get out of the country?" And people will send money to them. And that is something as a congregation who deal with probably a significant amount of elderly people. If you find somebody who's all of a sudden seeming that they found somebody in their life and it's online and they've never met that person, and all of a sudden they start sending money to that person, that is when you need to, as a community, come together and try and help that person, because that person can lose everything. We have people who have come to us after a year, and they've been told over and over again, and their entire life savings. We had one person who lost their entire house, hundreds of thousands of dollars that they'd sent overseas because they thought somebody was going to marry them and they're going to have this wonderful life overseas, as soon as that person was able to pay his taxes. Extortion. This actually has been happening in Ottawa, where there has been letters being delivered to people to your mailbox, and basically saying, "We know what you did. If you don't pay us in Bitcoin in the next 60 days, we're going to release what you did." They don't say what you did, but everybody probably has secrets that they don't want out, and they are relying on that you're going to panic, and people send money to these people, these scammers, and we've seen that rising, that fraud in Ottawa in the last couple months. Service scams. These frauds offer such as tech support. Everybody's probably got a phone call from a Windows operator saying they're going to fix your computer. That's an entire scam in which they try and get into your computer system, get all your passwords, get your banking information, or get you to download computer programs onto your computer that will steal data from you. And they then use that data to open up bank accounts in your name, create mortgages in your name, and that all of a sudden you're realizing that you now have nothing left in your bank, or you have a huge credit card debt that you never were responsible for. This was another thing that just happened up the valley, and it does happen in Ottawa. It's a mortgage scam where it's very cruel. Is that someone comes and knocks on your door and says, "We're going to give you a deal on a hot water tank because there's this green energy deal, and we're going to save you money through this government grant. So we're going to install this hot water tank, and you're only going to pay $5,000, and the government's going to pay the other $15,000. But what they do is they open up it was called a nosy on your house. That's being outlawed as of January, but they still try and open up mortgages on your house. And all of a sudden you have a second mortgage on your house when you think you have none. And what happens is a year later you get a notice from your bank going and saying you haven't paid your second mortgage. If you don't pay us $10,000 in the next 30 days, we're going to foreclose on you. And there's been a lot of people who have lost their houses in relation to that type of scam. This is, if you've dealt with this person, come talk to me. But this person was arrested in the Greater London area, but I do know he was operating in the Ottawa area around Christmas last year. There's also the other, as I mentioned before, the bank investigator. You'll get a call from saying, we're trying to catch somebody who's scamming our bank. So what we want to do is we want to take money from one of our trusted accounts and put it into your account, and then we're going to move that to another account. Well, what they're doing is they're getting online and they're seeing what you have, and they're going into a credit line, your own credit line, and moving money into your savings account, and then getting you to move that into another account, and they're taking that money. And people don't realize it until they go back and check their actual bank statements, and they realize that that $10,000 or $20,000 that they moved for this bank investigator is actually money that's come out of their credit line or out of another bank account. And it could be $20,000, it could be $10,000, it could be $5,000. It all depends what the scammer can get. I can tell you, the banks aren't going to call you to solve their problems. They have a lot of money, and they're going to solve the problems internally, and definitely don't want to have their clientele know that there's any issues. Prize. You can't win a lottery if you haven't played, and you can't win a lottery in another country that you haven't been to. Oftentimes you'll get a phone call or a letter saying, hey, congratulations, you've won this lottery. You just have to pay the taxes on it. And you pay the $10,000 in taxes and you get your $1 million. Well, you pay the $10,000 and you never get your $1 million. Phishing. This is what comes on your phone. You'll see text messages. One of the big ones now is you've got a package from Amazon, or your package from Amazon wasn't deliverable. Please click on this link and fill out this form so that we can find a better time to deliver your package. And all they're doing is they're collecting your data that they can use to set up bank accounts or credit cards in your name. This is an example. I have to put on my glasses here. Yeah, it was for the city of Calgary. We saw something very similar in the Ottawa area for parking offenses. So basically the city of Calgary was supposedly sending out saying you needed $103 to be paid, and you had to do it through this system. And you'd click on the link, and you put your credit card information on. They would debit you $103. You'd lose the $103, but they also then have all your credit card data that they can use. And this is one that I got to my personal email. And this is what they do, is that this was, I think, sent at 7 o'clock in the morning. And they said, well, if you don't respond immediately, your email is going to be cut off by noon. So people are going to panic. They're going to hit that button and then fill out the information because you don't want to lose your email or you don't want to lose your bank account. You'll be frozen. So that does happen. And then one of the other things that we actually had some success with is granny scams. And I call it granny scams. They like to, it's politically correct as emergency scams, but women outlive men, so it's usually grannies that are affected. But what happens is there was an organized group in Montreal that was calling house numbers, people who had actual house phones, and they would be pretending to be the elderly person's grandson and saying, I've been arrested, I've been in an accident, and I need bail. I need $10,000, well, it's usually $9,999 for bail so that I don't go to jail. And they send somebody to your house, and they want it in cash, and they say that you need cash to bail your grandson out. And the grandson always says, oh, don't tell mom and dad because I'm really embarrassed about this. Don't tell them. I just want to keep it between you and me. And they were able to fool a lot of people. The big thing about that, most people don't know the Canadian legal system. There's nothing, and you know, the legal system is what you see on TV from the States. And in the States, they have what they call cash bond or cash bail, where you have to come up with actual cash, and you have to put it in someone's hand. In Canada, we don't have that. Nowhere in Canada is there cash bail. You don't have to give a judge or a lawyer $10,000 to get your loved one out of jail. There's an entire process. You have to go to the courthouse, and you have to sit in the courthouse and have to say, yeah, if the person doesn't obey the rules, I will have to pay $10,000. But most people don't know that, and people are using that information because they know you watch American TV. Everybody knows what a bail bondsman is because of what they see on TV, and they think that's what happens in Canada, and it's not. And identity theft, as your pastor found out, people will take over your identity, and they're just going to try and take money from your friends, and they're going to try and take money away from you. So what do you do if you are scammed? One, report to the police. We may not be able to do anything for you, but if we know what's going on in the city, we can then warn people. We can also come out and educate people. But we have a database that we can compare with what's going on across the country, and as a bigger entity like the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre or the RCMP or the OPP in Ontario, we can take that information and we can use that information to help identify who the bad people are, and we can try and stop them. So even if it's if you don't report it to the police, you report it to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, all that information helps. I was called on this number, I was called on this date, and this is what the person said to me, or I received a text message, and this is the text message that I received, and it was from this telephone number. That helps. There are processes out there where we can have the telephone numbers disabled, we can have the websites disabled, and it's important. If you have been scammed, and I hope the pastor in here has done this, contacted the two major credit bureau agencies in Canada. They're the ones who hold your credit so that it doesn't affect your bank accounts. Report to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. Go in and review your financial statements. Just make sure that all your banking is in proper order. If you suspect your mail is being redirected, you can call Canada Post to make sure that it hasn't been redirected. Change your passwords. Definitely, if your account has been hacked and any of your social media, go in and immediately change your passwords. And then if you've lost, if someone has stolen your passport or your health card, notify the appropriate agency that has. And this is again, to the community in general. You have a healthy community here. Talk to people. If you suspect something is going wrong with that person, or if you see that person is having trouble, talk to them. Ask them what's wrong. Most people are so embarrassed about losing their paycheck or their savings. You're going to have to talk to somebody about that, and as a community, we need to talk to people. We need to help them. Everybody makes mistakes. Unfortunately, some people get very overwhelmed by these things, and people be known to take their lives because they've lost so much money or their family's money. So it's very important that we talk to people. And the other thing is, don't be scared to talk. What I've told you here, and the information I have up here, share with people. Because if you haven't been scammed, somebody else in your community has been scammed, and they don't know it's happening. So if you give them the information, it helps save people. I'm running out of time. Again, 211 is a good number to remember, and anybody in your community who you think might be struggling and is maybe in a position where they're not necessarily going to listen to you, or give them 211 number. Say, hey, if you have any questions, call 211. They have the information. They know where all the proper bank numbers are. They know all the proper government agencies and who you're supposed to contact. Again, 211. These are some of the big red flags we see. Transferring money, if someone's asking you to transfer money through Western Union, that's usually a warning flag. You can't win lottery or cruises without playing. You can't pay your taxes with gift cards. That's one of the big scams that's been going around in the city of Ottawa, where they were calling to say, oh, you owe taxes, so go get $200 in gift cards and give us the number, and you've paid off your taxes. Or your hydro bill. You can pay off your hydro bill with gift cards. No, you can't. They're just trying to steal money from you. And also, the other thing is that if someone sends you a check saying, here's, you've inherited $10,000 from some unknown person living in the UK, it's probably a fraud. And don't try and cash this check because you're likely to lose money. These are the numbers for the credit bureaus in Canada. If you are a victim of a fraud, please reach out to them. Tell them that you have been a victim, and they will ensure that your credit and your bank accounts are safe. Again, if you are a victim, call the Ottawa Police Service. You can report online any fraud, or call the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. It's the information that helps us. We were able to identify people, and we were able to try and put a stop to it. It is very dangerous. Those are the different places that you can get more information from. And questions. I know that was really fast. It's usually an hour-long presentation, so I wanted to fly through it. But does anybody have any questions for me? If not. Yes, ma'am.
One of my concerns is hearing this information. I want to say thank you, first of all, for coming here to inform us of this. But I've been hearing this on the news, and the part that I'm not hearing is what is the government's role in mandating the financial institutions to do more to protect the customer's identity. For example, fraud recently for a person from Manatee. She was on the computer. She got a call saying she was on her computer, and she recognized immediately that this was a fraud. She shut the computer down, drove to the bank, told the bank what was happening. They checked her account. Nothing was untoward, meaning everything was the way it ought to have been. She double-checked with them again. Are you sure? Because I know something went wrong here.
Those online can't hear your questions.
Oh, my apologies for those who didn't hear. I was saying to... Okay.
Cameron, please,
Okay,
Cameron.
good. So my concern is that the government is not doing enough to mandate the financial institutions to make more effort to protect those who do not understand the technology. In addition, why isn't it in law now, by now, in terms of cybercrime, that the proceeds of crime should be tracked down with no limitations and assets seized in law so that crime can be fought, so that the people doing this are brought to justice and recognize crime doesn't pay?
Have you thought of running for Parliament? I'm trying not to get myself in trouble, because this is recorded. As a police, when it comes to money, that's always what it's about. The fraud's about money, but also the policing aspect is about money. In 2016, my unit had 16 officers plus 3 NCOs looking at fraud, and we were getting about 3,000 cases of fraud a year. I have 6 officers now, and I'm getting about 6,000 cases of fraud a year. The priority, and I agree with the priorities on violence, the priorities on gun violence, the priorities on violence against women. But to, as I said, try not to get myself in trouble. To investigate fraud is very, very hard. The cases that I have with my officers investigating, they will take, on a difficult case, it'll take a year to proceed. And then it goes to courts. And the courts look at it, and I'm not saying judges are stupid, but judges aren't necessarily financial experts. And they don't understand. And so they would much rather deal with you coming over and punching me in the nose than dealing with a financial crime. That's something they understand. They don't understand, okay, well, the person signed on through an IP address that was located in Toronto and that was then routed to Ottawa through another IP address, and they use this person's bank account to transfer funds from this bank account to this bank account into this bank account. They get confused. So it's not a popular case to try in court. As for the banks, we try. The granny scam that we had, I had an officer who was dedicated to that, and we went into Montreal. And OPP and a whole bunch of Toronto area officers and the Ottawa area officers went into Montreal with the Sécurité de Québec, and we arrested a whole bunch of people in Montreal because that's where they were committing the crime. We made a big show of it. We had a news conference. We showed the results. One of the newspapers, or one of the TV newspapers, was following us along, and there's going to be a show about what we did. So we're trying to incentivize the banks to take more responsibility on their clients, because it's your client, it's your money, or it's their money, and you're supposed to be protecting them. But in the end, the one problem I've spoken to bank personnel about is that if you come into the bank, you're a very nice lady. You're going to come into the bank, you're going to say, I want to take $10,000 out of my bank account. And when they say, well, we think you're getting scammed, you're going, no, I'm not getting scammed. I'm trying to get my driveway fixed. I want to get this done now. I need $10,000. The bank goes, what do we do? One of the recommendations we've had is you put it, if someone's asking in that situation, you put a 24-hour wait period. You say, well, we can't give you $10,000 in cash right now. You have to order that money. And I've seen some banks say that, is that if you want to withdraw $10,000 in cash, you have to come back tomorrow. And at least that way, there's a cooling off period, and because fraudsters want the money right away. They don't want to be hanging around your house. They don't want to be hanging around you, because the more likely their picture will be taken, the more likely you'll become suspicious. So it's an instantaneous thing where they literally are known to drive people to banks. They will put you in a car, drive you to the bank, tell you, say this, this, and this, and they'll have the cell phone on telling you what to say in order to get your money. So the idea is, okay, one of our recommendations is like, yes, if you want to withdraw $10,000 in cash, you have to come to the bank, you have to say, okay, I'm putting an extension onto my deck, I need $10,000 to build this deck, or I'm putting something, I'm having a big family wedding, I need $10,000 to pay for this wedding. Okay, that's great, you're going to pay for cash. Why are you paying for cash? Well, I'm getting a discount. Which you shouldn't be doing, because that would be breaking the law. But I'm getting cash to save some money on the taxes. Banks are not going to like that, but they can say, come back tomorrow and we'll give you the $10,000. That at least gives them the opportunity. And certainly for anybody in this room who has elderly parents, encourage them to put you on as a cosigner, or somebody who is someone who they can call if they believe you're being scammed. And I had it with my mom, I had it with my dad. They've passed, but if they were to withdraw $10,000 from their bank account, the bank, there was literally on the account, call me, and I would say, okay, I'm going to call my dad and try and figure out what's going on. And my dad was a RCMP officer for 35 years, and he was scammed through one of the gaming things. So it does happen to everybody. It's not one community or another community or one age bracket, or it happens to everyone. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
My question is having to do with how does the local police handle some of the scams, like if reported, that are offshore,
So-
mostly
Offshore.
India or places like that, Nigeria or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Is it just for stats where you take it? Because what can you do?
So right now, the big countries that are scamming are Nigeria, North Africa, Cyprus, India. Those are the big places with their call centers. And then Seychelles. Those are the places where a lot of the money winds up. But they don't have, like in Seychelles, they don't have any agreements with other countries to exchange information. They have a very small police force, but they have a big cryptocurrency trading center there, and all the money goes into the Seychelles, and it's like, well, we can't do anything. We can do education. If you know somebody who's been a victim of cryptocurrency trades, if we can catch them within 48 hours, there's an ability to stop the transaction, because all the transactions before it goes overseas goes through New York. And we do have really good cooperation with U.S. Federal agencies. And if we say this cryptocurrency is being moved, and it was just happened, and we have all the information, because they usually ask you to go to a cryptocurrency ATM and put your money in there, and there's a little tag that comes out with all the information. If we have that tag, and it's been 48 hours, 72 hours, we can sometimes help. But if it's, well, this happened 3 months ago, the money's gone. We do want the information, though, because we do want to be able to generate the intelligence that we can move out, that we can send to other countries or other people, and so we can use it in these presentations that we do. That this is the current scam we're doing. Almost every other week, I'm trying to put stuff out on our media, the Ottawa Police websites and Ottawa social media sites, warning people about the most recent scam. One of the most recent ones was that there was someone had gone around and put the scanning, I'm old, QR code, thank you, the QR codes on parking meters in the city. And people were using that, and it was sending them to another site, and they thought they were paying their parking fees.
But they were sending the money elsewhere.
They were sending the money elsewhere. So we got that information, and we put it out in the media, and we told people this is what's happening. No, you pay through the Ottawa, the City of Ottawa app, or you pay at the machine, not this QR code. That's one of the things we can do. Yeah. But we are looking into how that happened. But that takes a lot of work. The RCMP, the U.S., the higher level U.S. government officials, because U.S. is always involved in finance, so they're trying to look at this. Certainly, Europe as well. We're trying to exchange information and trying to find out where the money's going. And when we can, we have had some success in India, where we have taken down some of the call centers and we've been able to arrest people. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Can you say a little bit more or anything at all about scams involving immigration? We are a population, a church congregation where we have a lot of new immigrants, new families coming in, and I think we need to hear a little bit about that and what's the stats around that.
So
thank you. Immigration is,
that's actually, thank you for bringing it up, because that is actually something that is on the rise. The most recent group that were scammed were Indian students coming from India. And there are immigration broker, I think, I'm not, sorry, I'm not as familiar, if you know the proper terminology, tell me. Consultants, immigration consultants. There's one, I know, in the greater Ottawa area who has been acting improperly according to the rules for immigration. She is promising either jobs or education places, and they don't exist. And I think the one we were dealing with was mainly Filipino, and the community knows about it. The community's been, but it wasn't until the community told us that we were aware. So all these community groups were saying, well, don't trust her, don't trust her. But she was going around, no, I'll get your family to Canada. I'll get them into school in Canada. And she was taking their money. So they'd pay like, I don't know what those fees are, but like $5,000. They'd come to Canada, no one would pick them up. They thought they were going to Carleton University, and they'd get to Carleton University. They were told they would have housing and tuition paid, and they'd get here and they don't have anything. That happens. I think that's cruel. We don't have a lot. This is where we get into different bodies. There is a national body that regulates immigration consultants, and if we were made aware of those people, we can report them, or anybody in this community can report them to the, I forget what it's called. It's the oversight body for immigration consultants. And if you're not a registered consultant, they have the ability to assess fines. And then if you are a registered consultant, they can suspend your accreditations. Does that make sense? Yep. Yeah. It is something we're aware of. It's something that's, I know it has gone on, but there has been an increase in the last year and a half. At the back? As a police officer, what do you know about the profile of the scammers? Profile scammers? There's different scammers. There's the local scammers. There's the, as I said, the Irish travelers who come to Canada and they scam you. They scam you for a paving contract. They also do other things that we won't get into, but there's other illegal things they do as well. So they're out here to make as much money as they can during the good weather, and they go back to the UK about now. And they head back. So it's all about making money. What they'll do is they'll go to a high-end shop and they buy Rolex watches. And they go back through UK customs with 5 Rolex watches on their arm, each worth about $40,000. And they just say, well, that's my culture. My culture is to have multiple watches. And they walk into the country and they then go and sell those watches for $30,000. They're $30,000 here, they sell them for $25,000 there, and they've made their $25,000. That's one group. We have locals who do scams, like the group we had in Montreal. That was what they call traditional organized crime. And when you hear that, Italian mafia, that's who was running it. So you have that type of scams. And then we have the overseas groups. So it used to be Indian, Nigerian, Ukrainian, Russian, but the Ukrainian Russians are a little bit busy right now doing other things. So it's right now it's Nigerian and Indian. Those groups are organized groups. The higher ups make a lot of money. They usually hire people who have low prospects of getting a job. They hire them in call centers, and they make decent money for their economy, and they're paid like $100 a day when the average daily salary is like $10 a day. So they're actually making money better than what other people in their community are. So there's a little bit of pressure on that. And then the higher-ups, they're very organized, very criminal organized, and very violent. So anybody who steps out of line is dealt with very harshly. And that's where they get their, it's not loyalty, it's more fear. But I've heard that in Cyprus, they have conferences on how to run better scams. They rent a hotel and they have people come in and they will have conferences. Like I'm going to a conference next week in Calgary about how to try and combat cybercrime. They have conferences how to be better at cybercrime. Yeah, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Our church population is obviously, as you can see, quite diverse in age, and particularly as we look at the more senior population of the church, for those who have parents, what can we do? You mentioned about being on their account.
Yes.
To protect them, but what are there other things that can be done? Because I think particularly for parents in the older population, they may not be as sensitive to the fact that fraud exists and they could be taken advantage of.
Yes.
So what can you do as a child or as their child to better protect them beyond just being on their account? Is it like monitoring their cell phones or things like that, yes, or other tips that you can give? Thank you.
My dad was born in Canada in 1930. So he lived here his entire life, but when he was in his 70s, he was scammed. There are people who come to this country who've only been here for a few years. You bring your parents over, they're elderly. But everybody thinks of Canada as being this nice country full of friendly people and who are nice. That's what Canadians are known for. But unfortunately, being nice also means you're sometimes naive. And there are a lot of bad people out there who are, as I showed you in that slide, who are trying to separate people from their money. One of the big things is talk. Talk to your parents. Talk to your elder community here as well about the dangers of cell phone. Tell them, no, you can't pay anything with gift cards. Like, that's one of the big scams for elderly people, is that they get a phone call saying, we're going to shut off your power, or we're going to shut off your water. You need to pay us today. Go to the Best Buy, grab $200 in gift cards, come back, give them to us, and we'll pay. But the problem is you get on it's not the nicest term, but it's called a suckers list, and you'll get a call back 2 months later for the same thing. And then it just starts going. So talking is very good. I have some pamphlets up here that I've left. This one pamphlet here, I printed it out. I wasn't sure how many people were going to be here, but I've got 10 copies of it. This is scams that are targeted against mainly seniors, but younger people can become victims as well. Sharing that with them, and I can share this as a PDF to someone within your church, and just have it out there where you have a discussion with people. You have to bring it up in conversations, or even your kids who are on their cell phones all the time. If they're talking to your grandparents about the phone, my friend got scammed about this. He got a text messages about paying your Bell telephone with gift cards, or paying something else, or a scam about deliveries. Have them talk to them, because it might not be seen as you're preaching to them. That is something we have suggested in the past, is to have your kids talk to your grandparents, because it doesn't seem as if you're, as the child, telling the adult what they have to do. There are power of attorney. Those are always important things, but you have to make sure you have the proper person as power of attorney. Another section I control is the elder abuse section, and oftentimes we're dealing with people who are taking advantage of their parents because of power of attorney. But it's a very powerful tool, but you need to be careful with it. The banking, going in and talking to the bank, and especially if you notice the older people in your life or the older people in your community make sure that somebody is there to not second guess, but as that second sober thought of I'm going to withdraw $10,000 in cash. Okay, we're just going to call your son and just make sure it's okay that you just want to make sure that he's aware that you're withdrawing $10,000 in cash, because there's an embarrassment. When the big thing about scams is pressure, and that's why one of the things I'm talking about 211. It's a lot of times you get scammed because of the pressure. You need to make a decision now. You need to do this now. You have to hit this link now. And they say, well, if you don't trust me, call me back on this number. Well, you're just calling back the bad guy. And so that's why I recommend 211. If a person is getting pressured to make a decision about signing a document or opening up a credit card or doing something, tell them, look, if you're having that trouble, call 211. They'll give you the right number to call, and you make that phone call and use the number they gave. And it's a lot easier to remember 211 as opposed to a 7-digit number. And you just tell the person, yeah, okay, I'll get back to you. I'll call you on the proper number, and you hang up. Those are some of the ideas I have. I'm sure there's others.
Thank you so much. We do appreciate you being here and sharing this valuable information with us. We certainly wish that we had more time for questions, but there are some transcripts of the presentation. There are not many, but for those who would like to have one, we do have it here. And you said a PDF would be sent to the pastor?
I've got the pastor's email.
Yes.
I will send him a copy.
So if you do want a copy later, and you can't get one tonight, it will be available to you. So let's give a big hand of applause to the sergeant.
Thank you.
And we want to say thank you so much for
Thank you very much.
being here.
Yeah.
Give that to you. Yes, thank you. We have an equally important presentation coming next. And since we are going to save all that money because of the information we just received, no one is going to scam us, no one is going to take our money. We want to know how to budget that money. And so Nathan Hall will be talking to us about family budget. Thank you. Also, we do have some giveaways here for everyone in attendance. So at the end of the presentations, after Nathan, we have one more. You can just select a giveaway from the table here. Thank you.
All right, how y'all doing? Good, great. Sure. All right, great. So I've been asked to talk about budgets today. And I've given similar types of conversations before in the past, talking about the mechanics of budget. How do you allocate the money? How do you organize? How do you have better financial management? But after doing this conversation a lot of times and speaking with people on the subject matter and the current reality that we're facing, I'm taking a different approach with this one. I'm getting a lot of feedback here. I'll back away. So the reality that we're seeing is that Canadian households have an all-time high debt load, $2.41 trillion that Canadian households owe. The average Canadian is $41,500 in debt. That's non-mortgage debt. So that's your credit card, lines of credit, your bank note, all of those things. And then for every $1 of after-tax income that we earn, we owe $1.78. So every month, we're just going deeper and deeper into debt. So the need for good financial management has never been higher, right? The need is definitely there, but we're still seeing that the majority of Canadian households do not budget. We don't have a budget. We're not very clear on why. And, there's so many podcasts out there, YouTube videos, blogs, books, that if you wanted to know how to budget, the information is there for you. It's more accessible than ever before, but yet people aren't accessing it. And so I would like to suggest that it's more about a psychological and emotional barrier that people have when it comes to money than just the mechanics of how do you manage, how do you create a budget. And in particular, I see that, here we go. I see that a big cause of this is shame that people carry. We carry a lot of shame when it comes to money, right? The officer was just talking about it. We get scammed and we don't say anything because we feel ashamed about what happened. Some of us, we're ashamed because we make so much less than the people around us, our friends, or we're ashamed because we make more than our family members, our friends. We're ashamed about the fact that we have debt, right? I should have been more smarter than this. How did I end up in this situation? I should have been able to pay for my kids' tuition, but I can't, right? And so we carry a lot of this shame. Brené Brown says that shame needs 3 things to grow exponentially in our lives. So the first thing is secrecy. When we experience shame, we don't like to talk about it. We hide it in the closet, right? Just like the officer was saying, this thing happened to me, I lost money, and I want to hide it. I don't ever want to talk about it. I want to keep it a secret. But that secrecy helps the shame that we experience to grow. The second thing is silence. We don't want to talk about these things. We stay quiet. It's hush-hush. We don't talk about to our friends, our family, our church community. And the last thing is judgment, right? So we judge ourselves. You're so dumb. How could you have let this happen to you? How did I end up in this situation? We judge each other. And so these are the things, when we're secretive, when we're silent about money, when we're judgmental about it, it creates a lot of shame. And that shame prevents us from doing the things that we need to do to take care of ourselves financially. If you look around the church, there's so much wisdom in this room, so much experience, that if we were to all collectively share our knowledge, our wisdom about money with each other, how much better off would we all be? Right? But because of that shame, we stay silent. We don't talk about money. We're scared to bring these types of things up. And so today I want to look at 5 common barriers that I see, and then we're going to talk about them a little bit. And hopefully, it's a quick presentation, but just to get the ball rolling, to get us more comfortable talking about money and in our lives. So the first thing, my clicker's not working. This is a loner. My computer would not connect to the system. All right. I don't know. It's living in shame right now. Okay. All right. Are we good? All right, so the first barrier is this fear of facing reality. So I've spoke to a couple of people that say, I know I'm in debt, but I know there's credit cards over here, some over there, I owe money over here, but I don't know how much I actually owe. I don't know how much I'm paying in interest, and I'm too scared to look. It's like, I know it's a big number. I don't want to actually know what that number is because it's going to make me feel worse. Does that resonate with anybody here? No. All right. Are you too ashamed to tell me? All right, it's okay. I know, I hear it often, right? It's like, I don't know actually how much I'm owed. And so some quick tips as far as just getting yourself exposed to the numbers, simple tracking and breaking down the process. So if I can just identify, maybe I want to start with my grocery bill and see how much am I actually spending every month. And I start watching this. I start keeping track of it. Do I spend the same amount? Am I increasingly spending more? Does it shift from the winter to the summertime? And just get a little curious about what you're actually spending your money on, where it's all going. And then break down the process. So instead of trying to tackle everything at once, and I want to see everything that my money's doing, I just start with maybe one credit card. I start with my utilities. I start with my grocery bills so that I'm not completely overwhelmed by trying to take in all of this information. All right, so no one can relate to this fear of the reality. Okay, all right. Is there anything else you wanted to share on this subject? You know, any thoughts, feelings on that? Is that helpful or? Yeah, the eyes glaze over, right? So we'll talk about kind of more of the financial literacy in a bit, but you know, a lot of times just that fear of I don't want to know, right? Like I hear same thing. It's like I know I gained weight, but I don't want to look at the scale, right? To know actually how much because it makes me feel worse about myself, right? But it's important that we have the information so that we can make informed decisions based on that. All right, the next barrier is perceived restrictions and instant gratification. So, you know, a budget, I don't want to limit myself. I want to have fun. You know, it's like I want to enjoy the money. I want to enjoy the time that I have now. I don't want a budget. This sounds boring. It sounds restrictive. Does anyone relate to that one? Yes, a little bit. Yeah. Andrea, yeah. You know, and so some of the things that we can do is reframe, plan for some fun money and long-term benefits. So the idea that a budget is restrictive, it's really just a plan, right? So it's a plan that's going to help you facilitate all the dreams that you have, right? And so just changing that mindset that I'm not limiting myself. I want to accomplish all of these things. And so I have a plan that's going to help me to get there. So I'm not stopping myself. And in that plan, I can incorporate that fun money. So I want to make sure I'm having fun, or I put aside the things that bring me joy today. So I don't have to sacrifice having fun and benefiting from my hard work today, but I'm planning. I'm intentional about what I'm spending today so that I have for the future and I have for all my plans. And so always keeping in mind that long-term benefit of what do I want 10 years to look like, 20 years to look like from now. And then always keeping that in mind so that I'm not constantly sacrificing my future for the present moment. Next is a lack of financial education or just low confidence. So you kind of mentioned the eyes glazing over. It's overwhelming. I hear about interest rates. I hear about all these other things, terminology that I don't understand. It sounds very confusing and overwhelming. Does anyone else relate to that? Yes? All right, yeah, it can be a lot. And so I mentioned a lot of the free resources that exist right now. There's so many podcasts and YouTube channels that you can watch, and they're targeted for your lifestyle, where you're at. So if you're a young couple and you're trying to retire by 40, you can find people who've done it before, and they talked about their stories about how they achieved that. If you're, a single parent of 2, you can find somebody who has a YouTube channel talking about those things. So you can make it very relevant and personal to your experience. It doesn't have to be boring. There's a lot of educational and fun content that exists. And so just slowly start exposing yourself there. Start small. And so I'm just going to start watching these YouTube channels, and it'll educate me about certain terminology, and they'll make it fun, they'll make it relevant to me and my situation about what I'm trying to accomplish. And then last is to celebrate the wins, right? So if you are $40,000 in debt and you save $200, it might seem insignificant in the moment, right? But all of these things are adding up. And so we want to make sure that we're not just feeling that shame until I accomplish this larger goal of retirement or getting out of debt, and I want to celebrate along the way. So as the weeks go, if I plan to save 20% on my grocery bill this month, you know, that is a big win. So taking the time to celebrate and recognize and appreciating that goes a long way. Emotional spending. There, I heard a couple ums for that one. You know, it's like when I have a rough day at the office, you know, and I have to stop by at the mall to buy that new thing, right? I have to buy those new shoes. I have to buy, you know, I have to go to the store to get that drink that I like, or whatever the case may be, right? And so this is a very common one, right? We get upset, we're angry, we're happy, all sorts of feelings. We wanna buy things. And so some important tips are to identify those triggers. So what causes you to go out there to shop? Is it when you're angry, when you're sad, right? I notice that, okay, when my kids have a bad day, I feel this need to go out and buy them a toy or something like that. Or I feel the need to go out and do takeout when I have a bad day. So identify what causes you to go out and to spend that money. And then from there, you can slowly start to make gradual changes. So if I have multiple triggers, let me just focus on one of them and just becoming more mindful. That act of being intentional and mindful about what causes you to behave the way that you do is a huge step, right? Because once you start, because I'm sure most of the time we're not totally conscientious that we do these things that we do. It's just the patterns that we've developed over the years. So if you start becoming mindful about your patterns, it will enable you to start breaking those things. And then replacing that with old habits. So if I am used to, you know, okay, when me and my spouse fight and I would always go out and, you know, go to Tim Hortons or something like that, now I'll replace that with just going for a walk instead, or something that is in alignment with the goals that I have, something that is going to be helpful to me, right? But it all starts with that mindfulness, that intentionality to know what habits do I have so that I can start breaking them and challenging them. All right, and then unclear goals. Budgeting's only for people with money problems. Right, so this idea that, well, I'm not $40,000 in debt, so this isn't for me. I don't need to do all of this work. My money is fine. I can afford what I need to do. But like I said, a budget is just a plan, right? So we all need a plan with the money that we have, and that's what good stewardship is, right? We have something, and I'm very intentional about what I'm doing with it. And so we want to make sure that we all have a plan with the money that we've been given, that we're making sure that we're investing it, spending it in the right places. And a lot of that starts with just setting goals for yourself. So I have, you know, different intervals of goals. So I have a week goal, I have a month goal, a quarter goal, a year, 5-year, 10-year, retirement, right? And so if this way, I am constantly incentivized, right? So for this month, I'm trying to, you know, buy some clothes or buy some shoes or something like that. In a year, I want to buy a car. 5 years, I have our big anniversary, retirement, kids' tuition, right? So at every step of the way, I have something that's incentivizing me, something that I want. So I'm not restricting myself because these are the things that I want with my life. And so I'm creating a plan to make sure that I'm able to do all of these things. All right, and so redefining this idea of budget, that it is a plan for me. It's not something that you do when there's a problem. This is a way of life to make sure that I have all the things that I need. I'm taking care of myself for now and for the future to come. And then revisiting and adjusting, right? So just because you said you wanted to buy that car in a year from now, things change, right? And things evolve. And so it really comes down to that level of intentionality, that even if you are spending, you want to spend all your money on shoes and purses, just be mindful of it, right? Because it starts there. If I say, okay, I know I spent $600 a month on my clothes this month, right? And I know exactly the number. If you start becoming very intentional and mindful about that, your habits will most likely start changing, right? It's those who are spending the most that they're not necessarily keeping track of the details, and that's where things start falling apart. So if we start becoming more intentional about the money that we're coming in, where is it going? Okay, so you don't have to judge yourself about how you're spending it and be overcritical. Just start noticing what's coming in and where is it going. And as you start doing that more, you become much more mindful, right? It's just like when they started putting calories when you go to restaurants on the food, right? It's like, okay, well now I might still eat the Big Mac, but at least I'm conscientious that it was 3,000 calories, right? And I just start taking in that knowledge. Eventually you start making different decisions for yourself, the more mindful you are about these things. And so, to sum it all up, it was really important that, I think that was my slide. Yeah, to try and shine a light on the shame that we're feeling, right? It's intentional that when we feel shame, it's a habit that we want to stay in secrecy, in the darkness. We want to stay silent in our shame, that because it feels safer, right? We're protecting ourselves from others, from scrutiny. But in reality, when we shine a light on these things, this is how we start giving it so much power, right? When we embrace the shame and the nervousness and we embrace it with empathy and care and connection, this is how we rob it of its power, right? Just like the officer was saying, if we all shared information when we experienced scams, when we heard things, when we saw things, right? They would not have any power over us, but they know and they take advantage of the fact that we all feel ashamed, we stay quiet, and so they could do it to you and then do it to the person next to you, and neither of you would ever notice, right? And so this is the beauty of having a community like this, is that intergenerational, different walks of life, there's so much we could be learning from each other that if we open up and we start and we take it out of the darkness and we stop feeling the shame and we lean into it, we could all truly benefit as a community. In Ephesians 5:11, it says, "Do not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. For the things they do in secret are shameful even to mention, but all things being exposed by the light are made evident. For everything made evident is light, and for this reason it says, 'Awake, O sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Live wisely.'" So the more that we expose ourselves to the light, we don't have to live in the darkness, hide in the shame for the mistakes that we've made, for hardships that we experience, right? Part of good stewardship is making sure that we are open, we're honest about where we're at, so that we can start making good decisions moving forward. Any questions, thoughts, feelings? Yes?
According to your knowledge, what would you say the percentage of people who have a budget is?
I heard that Canadian households, roughly about like 45, have a rough budget, rough estimate. Sorry, it's high? Sounds high, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of apps now, too, that just kind of automatically budget and do things for you. So there's a lot of automation. Yeah, that, too. They might not stick to the budget, or they might say they might have done it at the beginning of the year and never checked back. So, it's self-selected on who has a budget. Do you have a question? A budget to make money? Do you have a budget to make money? Sorry, I don't understand. So if I make money?
And I'm not going to spend what I don't have.
Yeah.
But I don't worry about it. I don't budget. I just make sure that I have enough money.
Yeah, I think, it's important that we are good stewards of that money, that we're blessed. So making sure that we are spending it in the appropriate ways. Like, why do we have all of that money? So oftentimes we're hoarding because of the fear that we have around money, the discomfort, right? Like, I know that was something I struggled with. Like, okay, I can store it up, but scared to spend money, right? But then slowly starting to work through, it's like, okay, why am I scared? What am I nervous of? Does this make me feel safe to hold on to things and start working through some of those challenges? But I think how we are spending it, how we're allocating it is extremely important, because those are the things that we're blessed with, right? Like your children's story this morning, right? We have these things. What am I doing with what I've been blessed with and fortunate enough to have? And, you know, the barrier in terms of I don't have a problem, right? And that's a very common thing where it's like, okay, well, I have what I need to support all of my expenses. I don't need to have a plan. So, are you going to say something?
No, I'm just raising that because that's how some people do it. That's how some people do it, right?
Yeah.
You know what? I just have enough money. I don't spend a lot, right? Why? I don't go shopping until once in a while. Once in a while, I go shopping, and then I buy a lot of stuff, and then I don't go for another year.
Yeah, and, you know, sometimes it's like, the system works, right? I just put money in. I don't know where it's going, but I always have enough, right? And so we feel confident. But even in those situations, we want to make sure that we have a plan for our money. We're very intentional about the money that's coming in and what's going out, and we're doing it accordingly, okay? So we all need to have a plan. We should all have a plan. It's not just for people who are in debt. It's for all of us. Did you have a question? Yes, sorry.
You mentioned about death, and I believe that most Canadian, you know, they're in so much debt because of credit card. What advice would you give to especially young people who do not know how to manage credit cards?
Yeah.
You have to do this on AYD, on use day. I'm serious.
It's true, because I find that a lot of people having credit card and they get their bill and they said pay $10, not realizing that they will charge you interest on that money that you spend from the very day you purchase. And so that bill every month you think you're paying, but really and truly
just paying the interest.
Just paying interest. And sometimes what you pay is even less than the interest that your money, you know, accumulate. So I think it's a good idea. Oh, yes, when my son went to university the first 3 weeks, he called me and says, Mom, I have a credit card. Yeah. I says, bring me that credit card because you don't know how to use the credit card. So like I always says to my children, and I said it even to my husband, I think I'm the only person should have a credit card because really and truly, I have done this course before, so I'm saying to Vin, listen, when you get a credit card, there's a cutoff time, like for every month. So if you're going to do a big purchase and your credit card, your cutoff time, it might be the 16th of the month, then after the 16th, you do that big purchase because it will go to the following month instead of you doing it the 15th and have to pay for it at the end of the month. So I believe young people should have a clear understanding how to manage a credit card.
Yeah, so is that I don't feel like that was a question, but yeah, okay. Thank you.
Do you have a recommendation of a good app or something that can help those of us who want to start this budgeting process?
Yeah, there was one, I think I was using called Mint, but I think it changed. It got bought. I don't know what it's called now. That was the one I was using. There's one, EveryDollar. Yeah, MINT. And that one like connects straight to your bank accounts, and you can, and so it'll categorize, and so it does a lot of automation. And then EveryDollar. For which one, Mint? Yeah, I think it has budgeting in it. Mint is much more manual, so it's like you set every month, like, okay, how much am I going to spend, and then you track that. So that one I think is really good. That one, you know, Dave Ramsey. Yeah, so that's his app that he has. And so I think doing it that way helps with that intentionality. At the beginning of the month, I sit down, what are my expenses, what am I planning for, and creating that habit of thinking about these things. And so it is very simple. Yeah.
So it's not necessarily on the phone, on the computer. It's called GNU Cash, GNU Cash. And it's free, as in completely free, but it's a fantastic program to, you can do budgeting, but it's primarily for tracking. Every time you write a check or you spend money, you enter it, and it'll keep track. And at the end of the month, you can chart it, and you'll see how you're progressing.
Pay for that app.
Hold on. Was there were you good or okay? Sorry, who was first? Yeah.
You need to establish some form of credit. And I remember when I went to the bank, I wanted to purchase something. They said, "You have no credit." I said, "But I got money in the bank." "What do you mean I have no credit?" And one of the bank officer sat me down because I had to owe the student loan and stuff like that, and she helped me through this. She indicated, "You pay this one first because there was no interest. Sorry, you pay that one last. But the one that was incurring interest, you try to pay off that one fast."
Yeah.
And I remember when I got married, man, I realized I paid my student loan off. We celebrated. Not that we went and spent
Yeah.
the money that we saved. But it's important to know that one, and maybe you can share with us, how do one establish credit rating?
Yeah, I think, it's kind of, Copperfield might be able to touch on that, I think, but it's okay. I wasn't calling you out for sleeping, it's all good. It's kind of a mystery in terms of what causes how to get that credit score. They don't reveal that, but yeah, having a credit card and paying it off every month. Right. And so my philosophy was when I got my first one, because I did get kind of my first credit card, young. I was at a Raptors game. They promised me a free blanket with the Raptors. I couldn't resist, But then I learned it's like every time you open a new credit card, that does ding your credit score as well. But once you have a credit card, like my approach was if I can't pay it off at the end of the month, then I can't afford the thing that I'm buying. Right? And so never carrying a balance for anything. And so that really helps to get your line of credit. And so I never carried a balance. If I did, it was by accident. Not that I couldn't pay it. I just lost track of the date or whatever. So that when I was trying to, get a line of credit for school, I had a good credit score because of the practice of having the credit card and then just paying it off every month. And so that was, starting young, having that. And so that's why, like you're saying, if we have a credit card when you're young, it does help to establish that line of credit, but being very intentional with it, because a lot of people have completely destroyed their credit scores and, with just this little plastic card, so it has power in it. So, a lot of people, like the Dave Ramsey says, don't have a credit card, break it, cut it up. But, that's extreme, but oftentimes for extreme situations where people are, 6 figures in debt, it's like, okay, like we need to get very clear and tight about how we're spending money and what we're doing. And so in those situations, it is important that we have a lot of discipline in order to get us out of those bad situations. But as you develop more financial literacy and the ability to manage the credit cards, it can be a very helpful tool on how do I leverage debt to benefit me. Right? And so that's at a different stage. So depending on where you're at in the journey, I always be precautious, because some people say credit cards are bad, some are good. I have to know how to use it. It's a tool like Just like, a power tool in the wrong hands can do a lot of damage or it can do a lot of good, right? And so we want to make sure that we develop those skill sets so that we're not harming ourselves with the credit cards. Brother Grant, you had a question?
I was just going to say on the budgeting thing, a lot of the banks now have, in your online banking, are now bringing some of these apps there, so you can have some of these things. Yeah. And just on the line of credit, I remember when I first came back to Canada, and I had faithfully paid off all my loan and so on while I was overseas. I came back to Montreal. First of all, they said, "Who are you?" That's my bank. But what you don't realize that it was Royal Bank. Royal Bank in Quebec and Royal Bank in Ontario are two different animals. So they didn't know anything about it. I couldn't get a car. I couldn't get anything until, although I'd gone to the bank in London every month to pay my student loan and to pay it off. I traveled to the Royal Bank, paid it off. When I got to Quebec, they're like, "We don't know you." Yeah. So building a credit rating, as you say, is important, and it's helpful when you want to do anything you want to do, especially if you're leveraging debt or whatever. It's easy.
Yeah, and I think back to the idea of planning, from I don't know, like I just had clarity, I guess, on my own finances. So when I was young, paying off the credit card early, I had a student loan, but then being very intentional with paying that off very quickly to help build that line of credit. So I had never needed a line of credit until I bought a house, but because I was diligent in building it up, I never once looked at my credit score. I never thought about it, but because I was diligent for all of those years, when I needed a credit score, I was able to benefit from that, right? And so again, with that long-term planning with our money, making sure that we're doing the things to take care of ourselves now, but being intentional. It's like, okay, when I'm 30, I want to own a home. I want to have kids. When I'm this age, like I want to be able to pay for their tuition. I want to go on vacations. I want all of those things. So what do I need to do today in order to be able to have that life that I want to live? And so just having that level. So if there's one thing I want us to walk away with is that intentionality, right? Be very intentional about the money, keeping track of the money, what's coming in, how's it going out. And the more intentional, more mindful we are, then we're going to start making better decisions as a result of that. All right. Yes. Yeah.
So I'm just saying that, just beware of these things, because as your credit limit gets increased, it affects your line of credit, okay? And your credit rating. So just be careful of those.
Yeah, and go ahead. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, yes, for sure. And just being that being faithful in the little bits. I remember I was in a church once and a lady said, it's like, I know that God's not going to give me more because I can barely handle the little bit that he's given me to handle. And it was a very insightful, most people would never acknowledge that. They're like, I'm really bad at managing the little bit of salary that I get, so I can't imagine the damage that I would do to myself if I got more, right? And just that level of intentionality. But no matter how much we have, we can be good stewards of it, right? And we can be very intentional about the money, no matter how big or how small. It's the same principles that we want to follow. And as we become more, reliable in managing the small amounts, that's going to continue to increase, and you're going to be in a better place to be able to manage it well. So appreciating where you're at now, so that you can learn what you need to learn to get you to those next stages and continue to push on. Are we done? All right.
Can we give a big hand of applause? I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your presentation. Nathan is my go-to person for stewardship presentations. He did a presentation last year, which I enjoyed thoroughly, and this one also. In my family, my husband is the financial manager, so yesterday we were at the bank and I said, I hope you're understanding this because I'm not understanding it. And the financial advisor said to me, she said, you need to understand it too. So thank you. Thank you so much. I am going to extend my thanks to you also for being here, for supporting the stewardship ministry, and for gaining the benefits from this presentation this afternoon. I will have to skip down to the kitchen because I have to help to get ready for what's happening next, which is the corn boil. So Sister Terry Long, I'm going to ask you as the elder of the stewardship ministry to wrap up for me. I'll be listening from downstairs. You know, a while ago when I first took on the ministry, Pastor loaned me a book that said, not my mother's did, or even my generation give. We give because the Lord said it. The Lord said it, I do it, it's sufficient. But the new generation, or the way people give now, is that they need a motive, they need a scenario, they need a report on what the money is being used for before they give. So Elder Grant is going to talk to us about stewardship in a changing world. We know we can see the changes in our world. It's not the same as when our parents lived. It's not the same as when we were born. It's a different scenario. It's not our parents' offering plate. So Elder Grant will share with us stewardship in a changing world. And thank you, Elder Grant, I know how busy you are, and I always call on you. Thank you so much for being a willing steward.
Maybe we could just, as a good steward, we could just stand up, everybody, and take a brief break. Where's my? All right. Okay. We can sit down. Yeah. So what I'm going to present, or try to present, this is, of course, I'm standing between you and the what is it, the corn boil or whatever that you'll have, but it's still Sabbath, so they can't do it right now. So you have to stay with me. What I'm going to present, Sister Greenaway asked me to present, is a presentation that was done by Dr. Erica Pooney, who used to be the stewardship director of the General Conference. And what I'm going to do is to talk about some of the things that he raises, but I'm also going to play Dr. Pooney, saying some of these things first, and then we'll have an interactive discussion afterwards on some of the points. So I'll try to moderate it. We don't have a lot of time, and he has a lot to say. But so first of all, he's talking about stewardship in a changing world and how we should view this notion of stewardship. We've had some practical lessons today talking about fraud and so on. You might wonder, why is that part of stewardship? It's an important part of how we manage our lives, and oftentimes we are often not as careful. I was going to say careless, but I changed it to we're not as careful as we should be in how we interact around some of these things, and we don't learn. We don't want to learn. Stewardship, part of stewardship is actually learning as well. And I think Nathan was talking about learning. Oh, it's too confusing for me. I don't want to do this. Well, that's not good stewardship. Good stewardship is taking the time to learn about some of these things. And I hope that we can do that. Well, here we want to talk about what it means for us in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And so what we're going to do is listen, we're going to talk about, giving to the Lord, what that really means. And we're going to talk about the mission statement of the Seventh-day Adventist Church and why it's important and connected to stewardship, and then the changing realities. Hopefully we can get to all of those. And so we're going to listen, first of all, to Dr. Pooney talking about it, and I'll ask if we can play the YouTube video, right? Okay, let's go. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to invite you now to join me as we look at this particular reference that comes to us from the second part of the Bible, known as the New Testament. We're looking at a specific letter of the theologian and also the missionary Paul. Now, Bible history tells us that Paul wrote 3 letters to this church that was at Corinth, not too far from Athens today. Now, in the Bible or in the New Testament, we have 2 of those letters, but we're looking specifically at 2 Corinthians chapter 8, the first few verses, and hopefully this will provide for us an important point of departure for the rest of this presentation. Again, for your reference, we're looking at 2 Corinthians chapter 8. Because of space, obviously, I'm picking up only on verse 3, 4, and 5. But I'm going to take you to verse 2 to give us a context, a biblical context in understanding these verses that will follow. I'm using, for our purpose this morning, the New International Version of the Bible. So this is what we read from the NIV. Verse 2, it's not on the screen, but I will just give you a little reference to give us a point of understanding the situation where Paul is talking about. In verse 2, I better step back. So this was a letter that Paul wrote to the church, the Christian church that was at Corinth. We can assume that this was a house church that was in this particular location. Now, it's interesting to know that in its time, or at least in the New Testament time, when Paul was writing, that Corinth was a very rich city. It was a very affluent city. I suppose in terms of today's world, we could say that Corinth would be something like Singapore or Hong Kong. It was a city that was buzzing with business and traders. And obviously, the wealth of the city also impact the life of the Christian church that was there. Now, in contrast to another part of this geographical place that we're looking at here, specifically Macedonia, the Christian churches or house churches at Macedonia were not as affluent or rich like Corinth. However, Paul noted something very significant or important, and that has to do with their generosity, their willingness to give of their wealth in support of the mission of God. And so in writing this letter to the church at Corinth, Paul cited the example of the church at Macedonia. Church, of course, simply means people, the community of Christians at this particular location. And Paul makes the point in verse 2, and you can check it out in your Bibles, that these people were not very rich in terms of material wealth. In fact, in the NIV, probably in the King James Version as well, he talks about the fact that they were extremely poor. Notice the adjective. They were not just poor, but they were extremely poor. And we're talking about material wealth. But in spite of their poverty, and this is where we need to go now to those verses that you see on the screen, Paul said, and we're looking now at the text itself, they gave as much as they were able. In spite of their poverty, they gave beyond their ability. They gave more than they could give, and entirely on their own. So you can understand here why Paul is citing this group of believers or Christians by saying, you know, it's interesting to know that in spite of their lack of material resources, their generosity was extraordinary. And when they gave from the heart. They gave until it hurt. And there was no pressure put on them. In fact, they gave voluntarily for the cause of God. Again, we're looking at verse 3, 2 Corinthians chapter 8. But I want you now to come to verse 4. And if you have your own Bible, and if you have a pen for that matter, particularly in the NIV, and I'm looking at the screen here, you may want to underline the word pleaded. Pleaded. Verse 2 rather, they were poor Christians. Verse 3, but they were extraordinary in their generosity and giving. And then in verse 4, we see something very unusual in these Christians or believers. And that is, they came to what we would term the leaders of the church at that time and said, please, they begged, they pleaded and said, please do not cut us off from the privilege of being partners in the mission of God just because we are poor. Now, this is something else. I can tell you with my work at the General Conference, the world headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, where Dr. Evans and I and many of our colleagues will travel the world to give support to the church in different places, I have met some well-to-do, rich people, Christians, Adventists for that matter. And yet, in spite of their wealth, they would always look for an excuse not to give or to contribute to the cause of God. In this instance, these people were so different. They were saying, please, don't look at us and don't use our poverty as a means of putting us aside from being partners with God. I mean, what faith, what testimony of people with a commitment where they were willing to give everything for the cause of God. Now, that brings a very important question, and I'm coming now to verse 5. One would ask the question, what was the motivation? What drove these people to behave in such a way where they were willing to give everything for the cause of God? Now, if you look to the screen, and again, this is where you may want to look at your own Bibles for that matter, and you may want to underline some parts, as I have done here in verse 5, which I think are very important for our consideration this morning. You notice what I've done with the text on the screen, but but I'm going to pick up what I think it's very important for us to note and to underline. According to the text, they gave themselves first to the Lord. I'm going to repeat that. And again, if you have your own Bibles, you may want to underline this phrase. And we're looking at the example of the Macedonian Christians. They gave themselves first to the Lord. Now, here's my point, and I'm going to put it up in a moment, a fundamental principle of Christian stewardship. But here's my point. Stewardship is not about money. Stewardship has to do with our willingness as believers to release ourselves to God, first and foremost. This is not about money. Well, it includes money. But I want to emphasize the fact that first and foremost, stewardship, it's about people who are willing and committed to give themselves fully to God. Any other kind of a giving, whether it is our time, our skills and our talents, our resources for that matter, they are secondary. First and foremost, stewardship, it's about the giving of ourselves to the Lord and being partners with Him in the mission. It's interesting, and you may want to pick up on this reference for those of you who are leaders of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Here is an observation and a commentary from Ellen White herself, and you see the reference there from the book Acts of the Apostles. In fact, the example of the Macedonians was such that Ellen White also picked up in this statement by making this point, and I'm looking at the first sentence. The willingness to sacrifice on the part of the Macedonian believers came as a result of wholehearted consecration. Here's the point. Any giving, whether it is money, our time, or our resources, is an outcome of a heart that is consecrated to God. That is the most important thing in Christian stewardship. I want you now, and I appreciate the fact that you've been provided with a writing pad, and even if you don't, I think you owe it to yourself. I want you to write down these stewardship principles that you see on the screen. And I'm going to suggest to you that unless you understand what we are saying here, you don't really understand what Christian stewardship is all about. I want to engage our participant this morning by being part of this process of learning. While you are writing at the same time, I'm going to invite you to read together with me on the screen, and you can see it as you write. Okay, so here is the fundamental principle of Christian stewardship as expressed in this biblical text and reference that we've been looking at from 2 Corinthians chapter 8. I want you to join me now as we would read this principle together. Are you ready? Everybody, let's read. Christian stewardship and generosity starts with the giving of one's total self, note the emphasis, first, not second or last, first to God. Let's do it again. You're wonderful, and I know that you're participating in the learning process by reading this together with me, so let's do it without me trying to interrupt your reading. Everybody. Christian stewardship and generosity starts with the giving of one's total self first to God. Again, I would encourage those of you who will become leaders of the church in the future, whether you will be a treasurer of a conference or a union or a local church for that matter, or whether you're going to be a pastor. And those of us who are privileged enough to be part of the ministry.
Okay, thanks. So that's the first aspect of this. It talks about giving of oneself. And the text that was written there in chapter 8, verse 3, 4, and 5, it talks about the notion that the Macedonians pleaded with God for them to be part of this process. And real stewardship and giving starts with the giving of oneself, total self, first to God. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to have this discussion. First of all, what does giving oneself to the Lord first mean to you? What does giving oneself to the Lord first mean to you? Anybody? What does it mean? Do we have a... Anyone? In practical terms, let's be practical as well, not just spiritualized thinking. What does it mean in your life, in practical life?
I believe it means seeking the Lord first. We all know that tomorrow is not a promise, so each and every day we wake up, it's important to seek God, ask Him for His guidance, and placing everything that we know may happen in the day, and absolutely everything that we don't know will happen. We place it in His hand.
So seeking Him first, placing everything that will happen in our lives in God's hands. Anybody else? And give us a practical example of how this may be done.
I have learned at an early age, probably from another leader of our church in Toronto, that first thing in the morning is you consecrate your life to the Lord. And when you give yourself to the Lord and lay all whatever you're going to do before the Lord and says, Lord, you rule and overrule and let your will be accomplished in my life, then the Holy Spirit will work with you as you go through the day in whatever your plans are, directing you in that way. So when it comes to giving of oneself, it's your total, your talent, whatever you do, you're doing it knowing that God is working through you to accomplish your task. And I find that even when I go to work, I said, Lord, I really don't know how this day going to work out, but I believe that you're the one who give wisdom and knowledge. So I'm going to depend on you to see me through this project. And at the end of the day, I can say, praise be to God. And I remember in a practical way how it worked for me, challenge myself after a good pastor friend of mine rebuked me in Toronto on spending. And I tell myself, Lord, I will not go out and buy a dress for X amount of dollars again. And when Vin and I was dating, he was going, probably you remember that, the Harry Jerome Award, and I had to get a dress, and it was the Thursday, and I still did not find a dress because I refused to spend the $100 on a dress. And I ended up getting 2 dresses for the $100, and I said, praise be to God. I just walked in this boutique, and there was these 2 beautiful dresses, and they were on sale, 2 for 1, and I got 2 dresses for the $100. And so that's when I really, truly believe that when you surrender what you have yourself to the Lord, He works things out for you in ways you do not understand.
Mm-hmm. And as we think about that, how does it change the way, and she referenced that, how does that change the way you relate to giving your time, talent, and treasure, and all the other things that we're talking about? And what change would this make to your life and how you conduct your personal business?
Happy Sabbath, Saints.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to give, I have as a different definition of what I'd say giving oneself to the Lord is. I think of it as how you'd give yourself to maybe a partner when you're getting married. So giving yourself to the Lord maybe could be opening a relationship with God where you are submitting yourself to Him and putting His will above yours. Yeah, and how would this change the way you relate to giving your time? You'd understand that it's not your time, it's God's time. So you are not giving Him, you are just, you're not, and when you're talking about tithe, they'd say you are paying tithe. You're not paying tithe, you're returning it because it's not yours in the first place.
Anybody else? Anybody else in response to one of those questions? How would it change what you do now? You know, giving yourself first to God. How does it change, you know, the way you do business, the way you live, the way you
it all belongs to God. So when we think that way, we're not giving to God anything, we're just returning to Him what already was His.
So the change is in the way you view these things.
Yes.
So one thing is not to view them as yours to give,
It's all God's.
but what God has given you,
And you just returning.
and you're returning or sharing that, you know, time, talent, and so on.
That's right.
Anything else on this one? What challenges do you foresee? You know, let's be practical in making this type of change. Is there, you know, it's one thing to talk about it, right? It's one thing to say, I'm going to give everything, you know, everything belongs to God and so on. What are some of the challenges that we face in shifting to this mindset? What are some of those challenges?
I think one of the challenges when you, I want to dissociate about, giving the talents with the treasure. I think when you, let's say you have young children, you might not be able to give the way you want to give as when you are close to retirement. So I think, that's...
So you're saying that depending on your life circumstances, different things, but in a way, even if you have children, right, in that circumstance, does that change the relationship? Like I can give God a lot now, and I can give, I can't give you a lot now, Lord. I can give you a lot later.
I don't think it was going to change the relationship because God knows what is inside your heart. But in a practical way, as you said, it might interfere.
Right. So maybe we also need to review what we mean. And I hear where you're going. Sometimes, even though I have a talent in this life cycle, I'm looking after the kids. I can't be out there, singing and doing all these other things because the kids. But I'd like to hazard to say that in actual fact, you're doing something that God has blessed you with, right? So sometimes we guilt ourselves into thinking that we should be doing something else when in actual fact, we're giving in that same relationship, right? Because at that time of my life, it has to be devoted to what God has blessed me with, the children and so on. At another time of my life, then I can give. But sometimes people will use the fact that they have children as an excuse for not giving, right? They'll say, well, I have my kids, I can't do anything else, or I can't give, or I can't do some of these things.
One of the challenges that I see is faith. One has to step out in faith. God says it, I believe it, and I'm going to do it. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, in stepping out there, I have never heard of a testimony or of anyone that has put God to the test and have gone and have been failed. I've never heard of it. So that in itself tells me that once you put God to the test and you step out in faith, you will be successful.
I think one of the challenge that I face in my younger days was when I made a commitment that I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to have my devotion and not to rush to get off to work. And I did find it a challenge, and I had to pray and says, Lord, this is time with you. And I used to do just a little 10 minutes when I get up at 5 because I'm rushing. And I find that after months, 2 months getting up, it becomes easier for me. You know, the Holy Spirit helps me because it was really a challenge. But to this day, getting up at 5 o'clock is not a problem for me. I can get up at 4 o'clock if I want to have my devotion. So I believe when we start off, not so strong, but as we persist in doing it by the grace of God, it becomes easy for us to get up and have our devotion for a good 45 minutes, because then you find yourself enjoying and want to spend more and more time with God. And another challenge that we face as a family is when I decide to stay home and raise the children and Vin alone working. And I tell you, it was not easy, but it's a commitment that we made, and we figured, this is what God would have us to do, so comes what may, we are going to do it. And believe me, it pays off the time that I was at home with the children, and we managed to even save more than when both of us was working. So I believe it's just, as Vince says, putting God to the test, stepped out in faith. When you make a decision, the Lord will enable you to do it because God is there with you all the way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Thanks a lot for the feedback on that part. So we're going to go on and talk just very briefly about the mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I think I don't know how much time we have if the timekeeper is here. We could spend a lot of time on all of this. But Brother Clifton, could you play that next piece, and then we'll have... Yeah.
To look at this mission statement of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Again, whether you are a student or already a worker with the church in the field, I think it's important for all of us to understand the core business of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I want you to take the reference. You probably can save yourself some writing, because you can pick up this same statement from other publications of the church. So you can take the reference, but I want you to focus on the first 3 lines, which really capture the essence of the mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And again, because you did so well in reading that principle just a couple of minutes ago, I'm going to invite you to read this mission statement and to start with the article "the" and finish with a comma right here after the word "people," because that is really the essence of the mission statement of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now let me take that back. Let's read the whole statement, and then we'll come back and just try and repeat that first part for us this morning. Are you ready to read together with me the mission statement of the Seventh-day Adventist Church on the screen? Let's do it together. The mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church is to make disciples of all people, communicating the everlasting gospel in the context of the 3 angels' messages of Revelation 14, 6-12, leading them to accept Jesus as personal Savior and unite with his remnant church, discipling them to serve him as Lord and preparing them for his soon return. Now that's the full statement. But again, I want to take you to the first 3 lines, which I think it's really the heart of this mission statement, or the core business of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church is to make disciples of all people. Very clear. The Seventh-day Adventist Church, as a not-for-profit organization, exists in the world not to make money, ladies and gentlemen, but to make disciples of the kingdom of God. Now, I say that because sometimes when we hear the word stewardship, somehow our mind immediately think of money. But I need to remind all of us that the Seventh-day Adventist Church is a spiritual organization. It's a not-for-profit organization. And our core business is not to make money, for that matter, but to make disciples for the kingdom of God. What do you say? That is our core business. Now, let me tell you why that is important for me. At the world headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, there are 14 departments and ministries of the church at that level. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, that in a local church you have 14 departments and ministries. But at the world headquarters level, there are 14 departments and ministries of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And stewardship is one of those departments. According to the president of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the current president of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, Elder Ted Wilson, the function of departments and ministries of the church is to support the mission of the organization. I'm going to repeat what I'm just saying, and then I'm going to make the connection between this mission statement and what we're doing today. According to the leader of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in the world right now, the function of departments, and it doesn't matter whether it operates at the local congregation or at the conference, union, or division, or the general conference for that matter. The function of departments and ministries is to support the mission of the church. Now, let me ask you one more time. What is the mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church? To make disciples. Now, what that means for me and Dr. Evans is that stewardship is in the business of supporting the mission of the church, and the mission of the church is to make disciples. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to make this bold statement one more time. Stewardship is not about money, and the Seventh-day Adventist Church is not about money. We are saying it very clear in our mission statement. We are in the business of making disciples for the kingdom of God. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I need to probably give a little bit of an explanation to what I've just said. While this is true, I am also aware, as an evangelist myself, that as you increase the number of disciples in a local church for that matter, naturally, you can expect an increase in tithe and offerings. Does that make sense to you? Does that make sense? Absolutely. But tithe and offerings is not our focus. Tithe and offerings is an outcome of the process of making disciples. Our business is to focus on people, to focus on the making of disciples. But it is true, as we increase the number of disciples in the world, we can also increase the bottom line of the organization. It makes sense. But our business, again, is the making of disciples.
So to put it in context, when we talk about stewardship and the business of the church, what we're here for I want us to talk about how does the mission of the Seventh-day Adventist, how does the mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church affect how the Ottawa Seventh-day Adventist Church organizes its various ministry activities. What is the mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church again? So how does that affect us as we organize our ministries in the church? Can't talk under your breath.
Well, it says, how does Seventh-day Adventist Church organizes various missionary activities? How does we in Ottawa do?
Yeah,
and
I wanted to come home.
I'm saying that you are the best one to say because you're in the ones who make all those plans. So what I'm going to say don't make any difference. I don't know what you do when you sit in your meeting.
Oh, I'm asking you to tell us what we should be doing.
Oh, what
so
you should be doing?
Well, you can.
Well, okay, I'm going to tell you what I think. What I think we should be doing. We should carry out the mandate that was set by the church and make evangelism the utmost thing of our church. We don't come here just to sit and eat sit and listen to a 5-minute sermon and go eat all the food downstairs. We need to go out and be missionaries, and we should be focusing more on that.
Amen. All right. Okay. Anybody else? How does it impact how we organize ourselves and our mission in the church? I think.
Well, Sister Lucy. Well, I believe as leaders of the church, we are not training the members to do missionary work. I find that, even I start from the pastor to come right down to the local leaders. Their mission is to equip members to go out there and do missionary work, and that is what is lacking in the church. We cannot tell people to do missionary work when they're not trained. So that is what is lacking, I believe, in this church. Mm-hmm.
So it means then, as we think about organizing ourselves, one of them has to be the focus on making people ready to make disciples, right? Go ahead.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm adding on what Sister Stephanie has said, but from what I've seen is that sometimes we tend to focus more on outreach and we forget the inreach. We forget ourselves. If we cannot start our mission work in here, how are we going out? We need to think, like let's say, the new leaders being trained, having children, like the children departments. How much are we putting into the children department? Are we going to get them when they are young, or are we going to wait for them when they are on the street and then go out and get them? So I think we need to think on how to get what we have here, not to let them go, and also how to go out and get those who are outside.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? How does that change how we allocate funding for these? We're talking about how does it change how we allocate what we spend our money on in the church? How does it impact us?
I'm just thinking that, yes, people need to be taught, but I think that we have to have that desire in our hearts to go and work for people. I remember when my mother-in-law was here, she would go into a crowd and she would say, "Oh, these people, they're going to get lost. Oh, dear Lord, they're going." And I used to say, "Mom, keep quiet," until I find myself in the same position where I am in amidst a crowd of people, and I said, "These people are going to be lost. What am I doing? What are you going to do? What can you do to reach out to them?" You have to have that desire to work for the Lord. And with all the training and with all the things that we do, if people don't have it within their heart, we're wasting our time.
Mm. Mm. Anybody else want to relate to this?
I think it's a balance. You do the outreach, which is you build your relationship with God, the in-reach, as Elder IU says, and the outreach. All three have to be there in the church. And so our focus and the mission of the church is evangelism, making disciples, whether it's within, we're training, or young people or even adults are still looking for that deeper relationship with Christ, which we have to disciple those. And then we still have to go out. So those three aspects have to be there. We're building our relationship with God, we're doing the outreach, and we're doing the in-reach as well. So that's my take on it. All three have to be there in balance, because you can't just do in-reach and don't do any outreach. It all has to be there in a balance, as well as your outreach in terms
actual
of...
fact, they actually mutually reinforce each other, right? Because your faith does not grow unless you do what? Unless you go, right? Unless you step forward. I always like to say to people that, you can't just believe, right? The devil believes and trembles, right? And many times we believe and tremble. That's not, faith has the other part, right? It's not faith until you do what? Until you move and step out, right? You cannot have that. And so you have to have both. You have to build, not just both, all three, as you indicate there. And how does it affect our funding? It makes us, for those of us, I'm the chair of the finance committee of this church, if you didn't know. That's one of the things I'm trying to get away and give to Copperfield or somebody else. But you see requests for funding coming for different things, right? And as a finance committee chair and the finance committee, you have to look at it and go like, is this what we should be spending our money on, right? Or in our ministries, or some of these things, right? We have to, it changes the way we think about, because if it's about making disciples, it also changes the way we measure success, right? How does this translate into actually achieving the mission of the church, right? How does it translate? Not just to make us feel good, although I'm not saying that making us feel good once in a while is not important. Yeah, it's good to spend money on socials. Why do we spend money on socials, right? Because going back to the point, it balances. Why do we spend money on food and so on? It helps, right? There are people that we're serving that we don't know that this is their only good meal that they have during the week, right? We don't know that, but we could be providing a benefit. So there's nothing wrong with that, as long as we know that we're not simply doing it just because I don't want to go home and cook, right? Well, we're not here to feed you if you have stuff in your fridge and you don't want to cook. We're doing it because of what? Because it's a ministry to our members. It's a ministry. We're doing it to support the work of making disciples and bringing disciples into the church. That's why we're doing it, not just because I shouldn't say you're lazy, but, right? Andrea.
Thank you. I was just going to say, the question is asked in the present tense about it organizes its various ministries. But at the same time, I almost think that it's forward thinking. How can we better organize ourselves as a church to address the mission that was shared about making disciples? And I think now is actually an opportune time, because we're at the end of 2024, going into 2025. So if there are time, if Pastor talked this morning about now is the time. So if there's any visiting on the focus of this local church, particularly as we have, I think if we look back at what we've done over the last 2 quarters about, building up prayer ministry, building up Sabbath school, and now looking at how we can better evangelize out into the community, it seems as though now is a time to see how we can restructure so that we can focus more on that in 2025.
Okay. One point over here.
My take on this is just sort of going back a little bit. Some individuals probably would not need training to be motivated to make disciples of others. That is true. But at the same token, when you provide training, others can be motivated through the method of training. Now, this is one of the areas where I find we're lacking. As a member of the finance committee and of the church board, sometimes we spend too much time dealing with the finances and sometimes forgetting our mandate to make disciples of people. And I think sometimes it's the enemy's plan to keep us distracted rather than focusing on the mission of the church.
No, and I think, as this is part of training too, and for all of us to reflect on this part, that the reason we're here is not simply to be part of a club, right? The reason we're here is to do something effective for God.
Yes. Last week we went out to introduce ourselves once again, reintroduce ourselves to the community. I believe, and as Dad said here, what we should be focusing on now, when are we going to go again? Another year? We should be, as leaders, start looking at when. And if it's training we need, we should be saying, okay, we're going to prepare our members to say, this is how you respond to people. Like one guy said, oh, you guys are from the church. I'm not into that. I'm not into the church thing. We didn't approach him yet, but he approached us with that statement. I don't know if the group before us had said something, but this is how we should be investing our time to meet our mission. When? We don't want the church to die down, because there was a lot of people who went last week. We want to keep that going. We want to keep that, flame going.
Yeah, and talking about that, and I think we had that here in the church, one of the things that is important when we know it's about making disciples is that we know that we have to have constant engagement with our community. Oftentimes in our church, we are focusing on programs. We're running programs every year. But I remember as we went out in the past, we had a focus on the people. You remember it says to make disciples, the focus is on the people. And we had many things going on, and some of them are still going on, in a community that can recognize that our engagement with them. So as we continue to plan, we must make sure that it's not just about my program. I'm going to have a program and it's going to be the best program, and I'm going to get people from here, there, and everywhere, and not people that we need to impact on a daily, weekly, and more than once a year or once every 2-year basis, right? So they can get to know us. And so when the church starts something like this, that is why we go back to certain places every year, because after a while, they will know that you are actually part of the community. And we talked about reintroducing ourselves. I know Sister Marie wants to. In actual fact, in this community, we are introducing ourselves because the community that was there before is no longer there. You remember, those of us who have been here for a while, this was the older people in Ottawa. This community has the most people that were elderly up to before the pandemic. If you were to look now,
different composition.
There are still a few left, but now you see it's changing to mostly, different families. Go ahead, Sister Marie.
Thank you. I was thinking in relation to what Brother Reed said, how critical it is for us to realize why we're here, why God placed us geographically in this spot. We ought to think that, yes, it was good to go out, but we have to realize that we have to be honest with ourselves and say, honestly, we missed the mark. We're going to celebrate 50 years. So for 50 years, we've been here. So if for 50 years I've been your neighbor, and one day suddenly I get up and say, hi, how are you? I'm the church. My response would not be, welcome, come on in. Because for 50 years we have failed. And one of the things that had saddened me last week, and I give God thanks for the fact that we went. We somehow, someone mentioned we had a lot of fun. It's not really fun because we have a world dying right around us. And we will be accountable for these souls because God will say, as the story was mentioned by Sister Paulette, what have you done with the one talent I gave you? I placed you here for a reason. And what I had hoped personally is that we would come back. Yes, we were hungry, but we would come back, pray, give God thanks for the fact that we were able to go, give a report. This is what we've encountered. This person could give a testimony. That home welcomed me, and they are on the side of coming and visit us. These are things we could tabulate and see from the crowd that went what was wrong, what is wrong out there, what is to be done, and what we should do. But somehow we quickly forgot why we went. And I'm hoping that we can somehow capture the report from the group that went, before it is too late. I think it was a year ago, I was invited to Montreal to take part in a day of prayer and fasting. They started at 6 o'clock in the morning, but those of us who were in Ottawa and elsewhere didn't make it until 9. But they started from 6 to 6. Half of the day, we went out, we spoke to the people, those who gave Bibles, those who gave pen. But what we did, we came back, gave a report. Please visit this home. Please take notice there's an elderly person living alone in that home. Please know that there's a sick person whom we said we prayed for, and we will follow up. So if we go, it's not the idea of going back, but if we go, let's follow up on the first visit and see how the Lord will help us make disciples of all people. Thank you.
What I was going to say is kind of related to what Marie-Edith was just saying. I think we have a problem with follow-up. So, for instance, we've had health department events in the past, and people from the community have come, and they leave their name and address and so on. And the last one I recall was when we did the blood pressure check. That was last year. We didn't have one this year, but we'll have one in the new year. And we asked people then, do you want us to contact you if there's some other health thing that we're doing? And some people did say yes. So from that, we had about, I don't remember how many people from the community came, but there were a few. But really, we haven't done anything with those people since then. And so I do think we need to be a little bit more, I see intentional is the word now, about keeping the contact, because I think I have the information, but I've done nothing with those people since. And I think we need to do that. So just sitting here, I had this idea. Supposing we have like a quarterly newsletter. I think I saw it somewhere, either where I live now or back in England, where the local church dropped off a kind of quarterly newsletter in the mailboxes. You know, this is what's happening. Now, we always feel like, you know, people won't come to the church because it's a church, you know, so maybe we need to develop our center of influence or something. But, you know, so say we're having a program like this today with seminars about scamming. That's something that the community could have benefited from. So I'm thinking if we could have a quarterly little newsletter and we just put them out there, who knows? You know, somebody might be moved to come. So I'm volunteering to help.
And can I add something? Also that in every church you have the personal ministries council meeting, which should have all the head of departments. So these are some of the things we would discuss at the personal ministry council meeting, how each department can do evangelism through the health, through women's ministry, men's ministry. All those aspects and planning would be relevant to the community. So there's some work to be done there. Also with Pentecost 2025, that will also kind of shift the focus of the church without no doubt. Going forward, Pastor and myself are kind of discussing how that shift is going to start to happen as we close off 2024. We have a lot of work to do. Keep us in prayer as we try to kind of bring together all these issues. We know that there's a problem when it comes to follow through. We were supposed to have a meeting this week. That got canceled for some reason, but hopefully this week coming we'll be able to meet with the personal ministry department, gather the information that we didn't get last week and move forward on the basis of that information. But keep us in prayer as well as we try to refocus the churches on the mission and the vision of the church. It will take time, but Pentecost 2025 will certainly cause a shift, and hopefully it's a permanent shift where we're working together with the different departments, how we can best win souls for Jesus Christ, and also improve our in-reach as well, because that's also an issue with the follow-through with our in-reach as well.
Amen.
I was just thinking, years ago, Pastor, what's his name? The short guy. No, Eddie Johnson.
Oh.
We used to have supper talk. Food unites people, and we'd invite the neighbors. Those days, it was the early days of vegetarianism, and invite people, free supper, come and sit and share with us what you have in mind. The neighbors close by. So this is something we can revisit, because often, yes, the church, we're blessed, and I thank God for that, but we are very inner-centric instead of being externally centric.
I also, obviously there are a lot of issues that are impacting us also because of the dispersion of the church and all kinds of other issues. And that shouldn't stop us, but we have had successes reaching out. It's not all doom and gloom. There were many things that were done in the community. We just need to start revitalizing some of those issues, because I was thinking, as we think back, in the summer, we used to have a community event at the school, and people would come, and we used to have all of these things. But post-pandemic, the community is different.
Yes, it is.
I can tell you, because walking around there, you can see that it's a different set of people, right? So they were not familiar with some of the things that were being done previously. So that's why I said we are introducing ourselves to these new people who have actually moved in. Exactly, yeah. 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 Okay, so we had a lot of good ideas. We're going to stop here. There are more things. I'd encourage you to listen to the video from Elder Pooney talking about the changing dynamics of the church, some of the things that we have talked about here that are changing, just the way we are relating to the world around us. But the point I think Sister Greenaway wanted to communicate in this, and why she asked me to do this one, is to show that stewardship is about putting God first, right? Committing ourselves first in everything that we do. And as I stand here, it is, and as I relate not just to younger people or all of us, this is a really important and difficult issue for many people, because the world in which we live is not putting God first, right? You listen to, if you're on YouTube and all of these things, what is it that the most thing you hear from all these influencers and so on? What is it? Right? Speak your own truth, do your own this and that, and people give all of these things that only depresses others who can't do those things, right? And a lot of young people now are depressed, I've seen everybody showing their this face out there, but their lives are all messed up, right? What we need to do is to tell them and to introduce them to the fact that when you put God first, right, all the things that we've talked about, saving, all of these things that were talked about today, start to come into focus, because you know that you can't just go out and spend money like water. Because you put God first. You talk about discipling, you realize that one of the things of discipling is to use money to help other people rather than spending it on the next, the 30th pair of shoes or the next dress, as you say, right? I'm gonna pull on Sister, You notice she didn't buy one dress though. She got two. Right?
God bless her.
And I didn't ask her if she gave one to her neighbor, did she? Okay, so right? So that's the blessing, because now she shared that blessing with someone else, right? So it might sound like we are just, it's a bunch of Christians talking these things. But some of us have lived through, we can give you stories of when things came and you thought that there was nothing, I know in my own experience, and now the Lord opens doors that you never thought would be there. And that is why I always use as my mantra, as always, go forward, right? You never know which doors, because if you don't go through the door, you don't know where the next door is that God will open. You're still at this door, hemming and hawing and thinking, I'm not, nobody likes me, blah, 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 instead of going out in faith and going through this door, and the next door will open, right? If we put God first. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Elder Grant. We want to say a big thank you to all the presenters this afternoon. We have had an amazing day, haven't we? Yes, we praise God. These are very serious times, and the information we have had today from morning until now is a reminder that things cannot remain the same. We cannot continue to maintain the status quo. Let the revival begin with me. And if each of us say that to ourselves, we recognize the importance of the moment in which we live. These are very, very serious times. So again, a ginormous thank you to our presenters this afternoon. I am convinced in my heart that we may not be able to get the police officer again. However, we need to do budgeting for our church people. And I would hope that we can still try again to bring back persons from law enforcement as it relates to scamming. I'm going to ask our leaders to make sure that we do this again, and this time an afternoon dedicated not just for us, but for our community. Because the value of this information being passed on is immeasurable to our community. When I hear that in the next 2-3 years, the scam from Canadians alone would have reached the trillions, it's up to a couple billions right now. These are serious times. So family, thank you so much. Presenters again, thank you. And thank you, the audience. You have been with us from morning. It tells me of the value you placed on this. Thank you. Some persons have left, so I'll cancel the song we were going to sing. It's okay. We sing in our hearts. We're going to sing, My Jesus, I Love Thee. It's because we love Jesus while we're here. Each one of you, you're going to walk up here right immediately after a prayer. You're going to take one item from here, whether it's a water bottle or a bag or a pen, as a reminder. This is a new day. Let us stand for prayer. Gracious God, we just want to thank you so much for your Holy Spirit's presence that has been with us since morning. Lord, we have been revived, we have been energized, we have been enlightened, and most importantly, your Holy Spirit is commanding us, reminding us of the mission of our church, why we are here, to make disciples of others, so that together we will be in the kingdom of God, celebrating with those that we have made a difference on by the way we walk, by the way we talk, by the way we live. And Lord, let everything we do be done to your honor and to your glory. Bless us as a church family, and may we continue, Lord, to let your will be amplified and magnified in our lives. This we ask with thanksgiving in the precious and wonderful name of Jesus. Amen. Be blessed, everyone. Coming up, take one item as a token. Oh, and yes, and don't leave. There's corn roast.